The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs has given approval for introducing the scheme for remission of duties and taxes on exported products. Under this scheme, a mechanism would be created for reimbursement of taxes, duties, levies at the central, state and local level, which are currently not being refunded under any other mechanism. These expenses are incurred in the process of manufacture and distribution of exported products. The scheme will give a boost to the domestic industry and Indian exports, providing a level playing field for Indian producers in the international market. India's exports rose for the first time in 7 months in February, growing by 2.91%. And for more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Ajay Sahai, Director General and CEO, FIO, Mr. S.C. Agarwal, Senior Member, ASSOCHAM, Dr. Subhash Chandra Pandey, former Special Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Welcome to Rajya Sabha Television, all of you. Dr. Pandey, let me come to you first. Take us through the salient features of RoDTEP scheme.
In the previous scheme of export incentives linked to manufacturing exports and service exports was the MEIS and SEIS schemes, where depending on the value of exports, a certain fixed percentage incentive was being given. The logic of the incentive is the same as which is for the new scheme, that is offsetting the burden of domestic taxes. But since it is directly linked to export value, it may also be seen as a sort of a subsidy to exports. While subsidy to export is not allowed under WTO, every country is entitled not to export its domestic taxes. So, the whole refinement is about calibrating, isolating the elements of tax and giving these refunds of taxes incurred in this thing through a more detailed analysis rather than fixing category wise fixed percentages. You go into different product categories, analyze the tax burden and to the extent possible try to refund actual taxes paid. So, that is the fine difference, otherwise the logic is the same. Zero rating of exports, a country need not export its domestic taxes.
Absolutely, but we also have to understand the components. Dr. Sai, what are the components that would be covered under the scheme?
In fact, a lot of refund to the exports already happens through different mechanisms. We have the GST refund, which provides the refund of GST taxes. We have the duty drawback scheme or parallel of the scheme, which takes into account the basic customs duty which are incurred in any imported inputs used in the export. But there are certain product and services and certain taxes which are not presently reimbursed under the existing regime. So, the new scheme will cover 3 elements. The first element will be the product and services which have not been brought under the GST, for example, petroleum products or electricity. Then the taxes which are not brought under the GST, for example, electricity duty, mandi tax, like taxes will be brought under the. And thirdly will be the incidence of embedded taxes, where on a product in the GST, since the final product attracts zero duty, the incidence of input tax is built into the price of the product, which makes the price of the product a little higher and which is not reimbursable because there is no separate component of the taxes. So, taking into account all these factors, the new scheme will be framed and as announced by the Commerce and Industry Minister, they will be launching the new scheme from 1st of April and we feel that the first sector which will be brought under this will be apparel and made-up sector because right now they are covered under the RoCTL scheme. For them, MEI scheme is already over from the last March. So, they will be first brought into it as and when the new sectors will be covered in the scheme, they will be taken out of the MEI scheme and they will be brought under the scheme. So, there will be phase out of the MEIs in this manner.
Absolutely, but let's get an industry perspective on it. Mr. Agarwal, your take on the RoDTEP scheme.
Yeah, it's better because here number one GST and these taxes will immediately refunded which were not connected earlier. And automated government has made the scheme for refunding of GST on automatic basis, and moreover this is considered a better scheme than the earlier MEIS and SEIS scheme.
So, we are talking about the earlier scheme, which is the MEIS scheme. Dr. Pandey, several exporters said that the issues are not addressed by this particular scheme. So, how will RoDTEP scheme ensure that there is push to the outward shipment?
You see, in any scheme of taxation or subsidies or minus taxation, giving incentives and this is always an issue in balancing the considerations of administrative convenience and equity. So, if we the earlier system where you had a fixed say 2% of the value of export, 3%, it is administratively easy today. But then there may be products where the actual incidence may be more, so they would be losers. There will be actual incidence less, and they will be net gainers of the incentive. So, and when you try to differentiate more on actual basis, good. Then again there will be some who will say no, it is not sufficiently differentiated. And if we go on endlessly differentiating, we would have to evolve just like GST and customs. Okay, at source, whatever tax is collected, whether it is electricity duty or municipal taxes or any taxes, you evolve through a digital tracking of the inputs into the and refund the actual paid. That will be the ideal situation. So, this what we are trying to work is a balance in between. For textiles and apparel, we already tried this reimbursement of state levies for 2 years. Where they for central government is refunding certain taxes, but there are state taxes embedded in, and for that textile export, the textile ministry came up with a fixed percentage based reimbursement of state levy. Now, those fixed percentages may fall short of actual incidence, may fall short of actual exporter expectation. So, this is an ongoing exercise as is brought out. When the schedules will be out for which category, what percentage, there will be lot of quantitative analysis will go into the ascertaining actual incident of taxation. And the more clarity there is in the value addition chain, the more penetration of digital information systems is there, which the GST network is promoting, and we hope that it will help. Then it will be possible to fine tune it on a continuing basis to the satisfaction of the exporters.
Right, you mentioned about digitization. Dr. Sahai, what kind of roadblocks would this remove?
In fact, I think the biggest benefit of this scheme will be that it will be for all sector. Government is saying that is zero rating of exports. That is the idea. I think all export sector would be covered. If you are looking into the MEIS scheme, certain sector, let us say petroleum or gems and jewelry, they are outside the MEIS benefit. So, one big gain will be that everyone will be covered under the scheme. The crucial issue will be how accurate data industry is providing to fix the rate, and at what digit the rates are being fixed, because that's also something which is debatable, whether government wants to move to 8 digit for the fixation of rate and then take the burden of fixing 11,000 odd rate, or like drawback they move to a 4-digit rate, having some flexibility, and then they are lessening their work. So, these issues needs to be deliberated, but as an industry organization, we feel that if you want to give little flexibility to the industry, it's better to fix the rate at 4-digit. That reduces the work also on the side of the government and the industry.
So, has FIO made the submission
We
to
have
the
made the
Ministry of Commerce
suggestion
and Industry?
that to start with, let us fix the rate at the 4-digit, because if you're fixing the rate at the 4-digit, definitely some flexibility is inbuilt in the scheme. The crucial issue will be how the new rates will be comparable with the existing MEIS rate, because for the industry, they are looking into the replacement which provide them more or less the same benefit, particularly in such challenging time. So, if the rates are comparable, I think industry will be much happy with the new scheme.
So, there's another important aspect, and which is of the WTO norms. Now, there were apprehensions that the earlier scheme was not really WTO compliant. How compliant is this particular scheme with the WTO norms, and what are the norms specifically?
The WTO norm says that you can provide refund of any taxes on inputs which is actually used in the production of export product. In addition to that, you are allowed to provide reimbursement of fuel, oil, energy and catalyst. So, beyond that, you are not allowed to give any kind of refund on exports. The new scheme, because that basically provides the refund of the tax on the inputs which are used in the export, is exactly within the parameter of the WTO discipline, which is governed by the agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures. The problem with the earlier scheme was that, first of all, it is based on the exports. There was some element of specificity in this. This was over and above the benefit which is already given, though of course we said that this basically offsets some of the disability in Indian exports, including the taxes which are not being reimbursed. But if you are looking into the agreement, we may not be meeting the exact technicalities of the agreement. So in fact, in the new scheme, we are addressing those concerns also.
And we are talking about the implementation of the scheme. Mr. Agarwal, what kind of operational challenges do you foresee from transition to the RoDTEP scheme from the MEI scheme?
You see, more clarity is there, as Mr. Sai said, as WTO requirement, government can refund the input tax credits and taxes. And earlier scheme was not clarity, it is not transparent to the extent, and this clearly give credit to all industries and to the level that what are input taxes has been incurred, that credit is to be given here. So this is a more transparent and better scheme.
So there's more clarity and there's more transparency, but Dr.
Yes.
Pandey, how will the government ensure that there's seamless transition?
As I said, that the digitalization, which is already happening in a big way, particularly in this sector, that will ensure the quality of data, reliability of data. On that depends how the government moves forward in this direction. The intent is very clear. Whatever taxation goes into manufacturing of exported goods must be refunded back. It must not be, tax must not be exported. So with this overarching objective, whatever it takes to clean up the data, provide reliable data, it should be possible, as I said, ideally, to refund the tax at source, the moment you establish that this is linked to actual manufacture. So I am very positive that it can be done, and it will be done.
Right, sir. And now let's widen the debate in the present context. Dr. Sahai, China's exports plummeted to 17.2% in January and February. For us, of course, there was a silver lining in February. Our exports, they saw a surge after almost 7 months. But should the traders be ready for a fresh bout of slowdown in the export sector?
In fact, going by the current trend, the way orders are being put on hold or orders are being cancelled, I think the current quarter is starting from 1st of April will definitely be challenging for the Indian exports. But if we are looking into the medium term, the way the Chinese economy has done and the fact that perception of China has changed with coming of the coronavirus, people will be quite apprehensive to take edible products from China, and that provide huge opportunity to country like India in sectors primarily as marine product, tea, coffee, tobacco, spices. Beside that, I think India can compete with China in many other product sectors also, including pharmaceuticals, chemicals, glassware, sanitary wares. So we have opportunity in many cases, but we have to keep in mind that when we are talking about replacing China in a market, the issue which boils down is the capacity.
Yes.
When we were talking about the tariff war, taking advantage of that, there were a number of buyers from US who wanted to place an order on India, and the size of order was the total exports of the country. So we need to create capacity if we want to take on either US in Chinese market or China in US and other market. And that's the need of the hour. This is an excellent opportunity for India also to attract investment. China's image is at an all-time low. People want to move away from China. China will find it extremely difficult to get investment, particularly in the next 1 to 2 years' time. If we can provide some kind of hand-holding to the investor in the country, and more importantly, providing them the plug-and-play field, it should not be expected that an investor will come and struggle to obtain land for a year or so. If we have a state-of-art facility, many of the countries, example, if you're looking into Ethiopia, Kenya has provided the facility. We have extra land which is lying in many of the special economic zone. If that can be denotified, if land and infrastructure facility is available, we will be able to attract a lot of investment in country like India at this
I'll take
point
that to
of
Mr.
time.
Agarwal. Mr. Agarwal, how do we expand the existing capacity?
You see, India's problem is capital. We have to make our laws very simple, easy to understand, and like laborers, acquiring of land, these laws are still difficult. So foreign nationals, what they want, they don't want disputes, and transparency, taxes should be easy to understand. So ease of doing business, Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister, is working on that. As you know, our we were at 142 place, now we are at less than 77. So we are doing that, and so if we are able to attract capital, the opportunity lost by China, we can attract those manufacturing activities, and we have to do, our global trade is just 1.65%, and we target, our economic policy has said that we must have shares 3.5% by 2025, and if that target be achieved, so we will create a 4 crore additional jobs. So, and I think for this, Assemble India can be a good thinking, as China has expanded like this only.
Yes.
So, by creating capacity, if we cannot manufacture everything, we should go for Assemble India. So, and moreover, we have to improve our labor skills and skills of our engineers, and we have to attract large capital. So, that is we required.
So from Make in India to Assemble in India,
Yes,
that's what
that
the
is
initiative
key. That should be the key.
But Dr. Pandey, there is this narrative that this is a huge opportunity for India to pursue the export-driven model. Your thoughts on that?
This is a very opportune time. The macro parameters are very, very favorable to India. The international market is flush with capital, with interest rates going to zero and bordering negative. The capital is not going to be a problem. We have modest inflation, which is going to be further moderated with the cheap oil. So, this cheaper oil and cheap finance, we have to capitalize on these positives and ramp up our capacities. In the existing manufacturing, generally the capacity utilization is averaging around 70–75%. So, even now, because of various operational constraints, liquidity problems, regulatory problems, the manufacturing is subdued. So, there is some slack available even in the existing investment to ramp up production, but that would not be able to meet the demand. Particularly on the say an export front, we have two different set of problems. One is that many of the inputs for manufacturing, we have been dependent on the imports from Chinese sources, and those supply lines have got disrupted. As we see when sitting today, China, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, they seem to be slowly coming back on that, and we hope that those supply lines will not remain disrupted for long, and but then the other side is that our potential lucrative markets, they are in pain. So, as if the supply line for manufacturing gets repaired, the supply line to buyers gets disrupted. So, in the short term, definitely even maintaining the current tempo of exports will be a challenge, but this is the time we should use to consolidate, expand capacity, for which a lot of work fortunately we have been doing for last 1 year in creating the investor friendly taxation and regulatory regime. I am working closely with Invest India, so I can tell you for sure that this policy, for example, Make in India, Assemble in India, giving production linked incentives, the policy for electronics manufacturing has been finalized. So, particularly for agriculture and pharma, we have immediate potential to go for in a big way. And as rightly observed about the negative sides of the current crisis on the sentiments towards China, and but it is both in terms of moving of manufacturing as well as also the attitude to edible products or other things which are susceptible to infections. So, the healthcare spending is going to be in focus worldwide. So, that offers an opportunity, it will new markets, the new businesses, and So, on the offsetting is travel and tourism
Right.
is had. So there are pluses and minuses, and therefore, even if we are able to maintain the tempo for next 1 year, that will be a very big positive achievement. But this is the time to consolidate and ramp up our domestic manufacturing capacity, and we are working on that.
Absolutely, sir. But Dr. Sahai, there are two basic concerns. One is, of course, the disruption of supply side, and the other, of course, is the permeation into newer markets. How do we address these two challenges?
In fact, if you look into the diversification of exports, both at the product level as well as the market level, a lot of diversification has happened, and our dependence on Europe and North America, which used to be around 55% of the export, has come down to around 30% of the exports. Our major export is now happening to Asia and other parts of the world also. Our exports to Latin America, Africa, CIS has definitely grown in last 10 years, but unfortunately the effort was not made on the import diversification. Yes. And coronavirus in China has flagged that issues quite substantially. There is need to create domestic capacities also, particularly in some of the strategic sector also, if you're talking about API and other,
Right.
that needs to be done. But when I'm looking into the India's export, there is some problem with our profile of exports also. If you look at the global trade, 50% of the global trade consists of electrical, electronics, automobile and petroleum sector. In this segment, which contribute to roughly 50% of world trade, first of all, its share in my total export is around 28%, and in the world, our share is just 0.8%. So if we are only in the segment where global trade is not happening significantly, we won't be able to go for quantum jump in exports. For us, textile, leather, handicraft, carpets are important because they are employment intensive sector. They may not be generating foreign exchange. They create a lot of employment opportunity. But these are not the sector on which I can pin hope for quantum jump in my exports. I have to change my export profile as per the world demand. Secondly, the high technology export share in global trade is happening. Today, China's high technology export is $658 billion. Forget about China. A small country like Singapore export $155 billion of high technology product. We export just $20 billion of high technology product. So if we are looking into quantum jump in exports, we have to map our manufacturing capability with the global demand.
Right.
And I think the focus has to come on R&D. We are the worst spenders of our R&D spending concern, and I think the fault lies more with the private sector, because whatever little R&D is happening in the country, it is largely because of the government investment.
Right.
So on the one hand, while the government needs to provide some kind of fiscal support to the R&D, and that's why I am very strong advocate that instead of providing 100% tax deduction, we should provide 200% tax deduction R&D. Because unless you innovate and you change your product profile, the global market is not going to stay for you.
And of course, the focus has to be on diversification.
Absolutely.
Giving you the last word, Mr. Agarwal. We saw that India opted out of Regional Comprehensive Partnership, giving primacy to Indian interests. In Budget 2020, we saw several endeavors that were unveiled by the government to promote exports. How do we further make our exports competitive and energize the entire export sector?
Actually, we have to make our export competitive. So we have to reduce our interest rate. We have to, though government has given incentive to small scale industries, 2% interest subvention, and on pre-shipment and post-shipment 3% more. And secondly, we have to make our loads simple, and our port connectivity, infrastructure, all these we have to make very competitive, so that the costing should reduce. So if we are able to make and land, capital and these indirect cost competitive, and incentives should be sufficient. Government is providing incentive for electronics, manufacturing, computer, and even medical devices. So on production base, so government is doing all that, but certain challenges are still there, and constraint of, as I told you, capital and various other factors. These challenges are still existing. So if we target for 10 years
Yes.
2030, and we target, in our economic policy it has been targeted that we should achieve 5% of global trade.
Yes.
So we should follow and we should monitor our policies yearly to achieve that long-term policy.